This is capital 2. You can go ahead and start the tape. As most of you know, this is variety, or the myth of not enough time. The three of us on the panel here are Chuck Stinchcomb from Beltsville, Maryland. We got Bronc Wise from Long Beach, California, and myself, Mike Seastrom from Northridge, California. We'd like to cover the topics listed in the handout, and we passed out the handout with the idea that if we started from an organized approach, it would not only give you a feeling of where we were and where we were going, but it would give you an idea so that you could put your comments where they're most appropriate. We don't want to get locked into or off the subject too much. We want to keep it moving along, but we also would like to keep this an even interchange between the three of us and you. Now, we have a mic right down in here, so if you're going to talk, please come up to the front and grab the mic, sit right next to Mickey up here, and talk so that everything can be picked up on the tape. All righty? First of all, there's a number of different subjects that are being presented at the same time, and all of our topics are closely interrelated. With this variety subject, it really gives us a lot of leeway in touching areas like music and demonstration of teaching techniques, the dropout, eliminating bad habits. A lot of those topics that are going on right now are topics that we have to at least touch upon in this segment. First of all, before we get going, I'd like to relate a little story that just gives my feeling of where we are as callers in relation to our teaching. And it starts out with a fellow who's an avid hunter, and he wants to teach his wife how to hunt. And so she'd like to learn because he goes hunting several times a year for 3 weeks at a time. And so in order to stay with him, what she does is she'd like to have him teach her how to hunt. So he teaches her how to shoot, and he teaches her how to track, and he teaches her how to shoot the animal and track him and mark her trail. And so it's just about time. She says, I think it's time for me to go hunting. And he says, okay, let's go hunting. It happens to be moose season, so they go out moose hunting, and they're out there moose hunting, and out for about a half a day with no luck at all. And finally they stop and decide, well, listen, let's split up. Let's see if we can go our separate ways and have a better chance of catching something. He says, but listen, he says, I want you to mark your trail just like I taught you. He says, if you shoot something, he says, stay with it. He says, there's a lot of poachers in the area. He says, tell you what, we'll have a signal. If you or I shoot something, stay with it. He says, and then fire your gun rapidly 3 times so that we can all, I'll hear you, you hear me, and then we'll follow our tracks back and stay with one another. So about 20 minutes down his trail, he hears this bam, and then he hears this bam, 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 and he just can't believe his wife's got something already. So he follows his trail back, and he meets the point where they split off, and he follows her trail out, and she's just marked her trail beautifully, seems to have just tracked it just right, and he rounds this corner, and there's his wife, and she's got this fella up against a tree with a gun barrel right underneath his neck, and the fella's saying, lady, it's okay, it's your moose, just let me get my saddle off it. And it kind of relates to where we are in teaching. Are we organized? Are we thorough enough? And that's what we'd like to take a look at today. To start this off, Chuck Stinchcomb is going to talk about the planning of class.
Good morning. Variety, the myth of not enough time. What do we mean by not enough time? Well, if we follow CALLERLAB's suggestion of 41 weeks of training for dancers, and not 41 weeks so much as sessions, it would seem that we would have enough time. But a lot of that depends on a number of things, such as the number of hours or length of time each session is involved. Just waiting for everybody to get seated. Now, to properly or to do the best job that you possibly can is to pre-plan your class so that you utilize not just 41 weeks, or in some areas this is down probably as low as 30 weeks, but it's somewhere in a space of weeks or time that most people or most scholars teach. So to properly or get the maximum benefit from your teach time, we suggest that you pre-plan your program. Now, that doesn't merely mean you have to get down and pre-plan each choreography or each set or everything else. We're talking about pre-planning the hours that you use. Also to use total time, not just 10 minutes for teaching, then 15-minute break or 10-minute break. But breaks are very important periods of time for learning for dancers. You can use them for identification of formations, and it's also important that you identify while they're dancing formations, but it's also important that they see it from a different viewpoint, and that is during the breaks you can have people demonstrate what a wave is, a line, proper ways of developing or moving into such things. It's a good time to use for styling, and not just the practice of it, but to watch and see what's happening. Most people learn by viewing just as much as instruction. It's also an excellent time to give them the history of square dancing, using that to relay or tell them about square dancing, its history, and it's also an excellent time to use it to tell them about the square dance world once they graduate, what's out there, not just clubs, but what's happening as far as square dance vacations, square dancing being international, and the many things they need. And it's an excellent time to teach them square dance etiquette, which is a prime thing. So that's part of the things of helping or planning a class. Also, as we all know, and everybody who's taught a class, I'm certain, has had helpers. You need them, square angels, as most people call them. They're very important things, but being part of the square dance class, we must learn, they must learn what is proper for them during a class period. And it's very important that the caller is the boss or the teacher and not the dancer. And he must make this known. And I don't mean to embarrass dancers while they're on the floor, but you can have a session prior to the class telling them what's to be expected of them. Their most important feature as a dancer is to be in the right place at the right time, and not to push somebody around, to shove somebody around, or anything else. It's just they do their part. They become the goalpost for the dancer or the beginner dancer to get into place. They also are not disturbing the class from the sidelines when they're not being used. They're there to assure the dancer or the beginner that he's moving in the right direction. And another thing I don't think or would like to not think they would do would be to add a lot of flourishes to their dancing, which distracts beginner dancers, because people who are learning are doing their best just to get through what the caller is calling to them or telling them. And if they have to spend their time catching up or trying to do exactly what the other dancer, it disturbs their learning period or disrupts them so that they create problems for themselves. Another thing for a caller in his planning of his class is to be flexible. Now, to be flexible means that you must have a great amount of material for the class so that you are not wasting their time. Part of that would be like, when I mean material, I'm not talking about calling material necessarily, even though that's a very important phase of it. But if you have all the material necessary for like handouts and go over them, I know that, what's Burdick's magazine? American Square Dancer? Yeah. He puts out an excellent list of do's and don'ts for square dancers. As a matter of fact, I think it's sort of free. Right. It's an indoctrination handbook also. That's something to cover, because it's very important that the dancer knows and has related to him the many things that he can do or should not do to make it, because this is an activity that involves not just one person but 8 people in a square, and they have to learn to work together, and that's the only way to do it. In your flexibility, if you have to, be prepared to spend extra time or different ways to teach the same call, depending on the ability of the class, and I think Bronc can relate to this in a few minutes. Also, assume nothing. Assume that they know nothing, regardless if you've taught it before. And that means you have to review, and review for 2 or 3, 4 weeks, depending on when they start to respond to anything that you do. But learn to not overteach. Let's see, I think that's about all on the pre-planning part of classes. So
I think one of the things that Chuck wanted to touch on was that there are aids or books that are available and should be used with your classes, whether they be through the American Square Dance Society and Stan Burdick's magazine, who has this whole series on square dancing, not only history but new dancers and styling and etiquette. American Square Dance Sets and Order has an excellent indoctrination book that's $20 $100. Also has basics and mainstream. Many of you are probably using these books already. There's a lot of books available, and these are nice things for dancers to be able to take home and look at and to discuss, especially when people are going to come up to you and say, I'm going to miss the next week or the next 2 weeks. Can you give me some idea what we're going to learn so I can read up on it? And then by providing them an avenue for review before the session or during the session or whatever, that gives you a little bit more flexibility. Ron, you'll have to come up and talk on the mic here, Ron.
Ron Black from Los Angeles. I had attempted to do exactly that with the American Square Dance handout. And what do you do when the club president says absolutely no, in no way, manner, form, or shape, that you shall hand out anything that we don't see fit? What do you tell them?
Basically, I think it's a matter of, if you are hired by a club, it's a matter of going to that club first and saying, this is what we need to do to enhance the dancer education, to add a bit more variety. That indoctrination book is a tremendous book for giving a dancer a total dance perspective, even before they're in the activity. And I think it's something, Ron, that matters of going to the class, the president first, and discussing some of these things, getting all this cleared away before you begin the class, so that a lot of this misunderstanding doesn't occur at the first or second night. And that's one of the main things, I think, that we as callers, if we are hired for another club where we don't have the total control, we have to work in that sense with the club even before we start. And that we're talking about the total amount of time, so that when you're planning the class, as Chuck was saying, that you can not only be able to know how many weeks you've got this class, but tell the president how far you can get them along and what kind of subjects you can cover in that amount of time. So it's a mutual understanding before you enter into that class situation. Did anybody have any other experiences on how many of you teach styling, square dance etiquette, history, philosophy, and perspective all in during the class? Super. More than half. Great. I think that's what we're really talking about, is a total dance education. Chuck?
I think what Bob Pointer from Illinois. I think, Ron, if you were to approach the people, they're hiring you to teach the class, and if you tell them, say, this is part of my program for teaching, and this is the way I teach, they have accepted you as their teacher, and you are the instructor for the class and nobody else. They've hired you for that. And however you get the job done, that's up to you. They shouldn't interfere in any way, form, or fashion. They should understand that when you first take the job.
As part of your leadership as a caller, you should have a special meeting when it's a club-run class, explaining to them everything that you expect from them and find out everything they expect from you. And the best way is tell them that you need this stuff to educate the dancer to be a better dancer.
Yeah, there is a mention of cost. I think for the time and the headache it saves you, it would be worth your cost. Although if the clubs may volunteer to fund it.
Most of it's a minimum cost, and
20 cents.
And handouts. If you get just one, you can reproduce them yourself.
Perhaps, Ron, and everybody here, that when you are hired into, well, this is just a question. Ron lives in Southern California, as I do, and several of the people here, that most of our square dance activity is club run. Workshops, more workshops are caller run, but most of our classes are club sponsored. I am very fortunate in that both of the classes that I'm teaching this year, that they are very understanding. In fact, both classes took the expense upon themselves and gave the people these sets and order handbooks, the ones that were approved, and they're very good. But I really haven't run into that. But perhaps maybe you want to try the spoon feeding method by recommending that maybe why don't you look into these books. I think they would be a good teaching aid, and I think it would be really worth your while to take a look at it, and then let them make the decision for you. And you never know, maybe that would work for you. I realize what you mean, that when you are contracted by a group, sometimes you do run into those difficulties, and it is a tough road to hoe.
Bob, why don't you come up and talk to the mic?
Bob Barnes, Newport Richey, Florida. I don't happen to run into that problem now because all of mine, of course, are caller run except one. But I'm just wondering if he could tell us what their objection was, so we'll know why they feared this particular thing, which we feel is a very important thing. I know for me, I don't think I have a student that doesn't have them, as I go through several hundred of them every year. But I'd like to know what their objection was.
The other alternative is the club doesn't want to foot the bill, or they don't want them out. You can just make them available. Say, I have them available in my case. If those of you are interested in a more academic point of learning to square dance, they are available from me, and put it simply as that, But I think a mutual understanding is the real answer here before you go into the situation. The other thing that I think Chuck was talking about with regards to class helpers, I think sometimes it's helped. I know it's helped me in the past with sitting down with a group ahead of time that first night and saying, all you helpers, we'd like to talk just a little bit. Or the second night of class, let's say, helpers, let's come on in about a half an hour early and let's talk a little bit about the art of being an angel, a square angel, and establish that ahead of time, that, hey, you are the boss, and that there's certain ways to help, and there's certain ways that while talking in squares can hinder. I think an understanding before your class starts and a pre-planning and an organization to start with really is the key in this case.
Can you just repeat it? There's an outline of 10 commandments, square angels available from American Square Dance.
Right. In their whole series of articles. You can buy their whole series of articles, I think, for $8 in American Square Dance. Right. All those articles are available. Yeah.
Can be reproduced.
And can be reproduced. Exactly. Right. Any other comments from anybody else on this soon? Bill? Come on up and talk a little bit. Anybody else wants to talk, come on up to the mic, and we'll finish this pre-planning segment.
Bill Donahue, Garden Grove, California. I wanted to ask you a question and get some input in terms of angels. What is the consensus on angels? 3 to fill a square, or as many as you can get from clubs? What is the general outlook?
Well, sometimes it's hard to put a specific number, but you need at least three couples to fill in, that in case you have one extra couple. But you don't want to discourage them by just limiting them, because a lot of times they'll come out half a dozen or so. But you got to also guard against having too many of them. You don't want them to disrupt the classes, and even though they may not dance, sometimes sitting on the sidelines can be disruptive, and so you have to guard against that.
I fully understand. What I'm trying to find out is how many people here prefer having a small amount of angels as compared to a large amount of angels. That's what I wanted to get a consensus of opinion.
Just as a simple hand count, how many like a large number of angels to be helping their classes? And how many would rather not have the angels present at all? So we have maybe a 3-to-1 relationship in favor of having angels present. Would anybody like to comment about not having their angels present? Chappie, would... But that's Chappie Chapman's comment from Oroville, California. Would rather not have the angels present, feels that they drag the class down just a little bit. John, you want to come up and talk? Right, John Fogg, three John feels is plenty. Ron?
Unfortunately, the same class and I was just following, I found to my dismay that a good 50% of the dancers didn't know their basics and were fighting me while I was teaching the branded beginners pure basics.
Right, and once again for the tape, Ron Black points out that a number of angels don't know their basics to start, and that can create a problem too. Right,
that can create a problem. That can be a twofold thing by having them as angels if you have a pre-planning session with them and instructing them what they can and cannot do. That way, maybe they'll listen while you're teaching and learn something themselves. And so they can help you out, but also you can improve their dance ability.
Art Seeley? Right. Right, just for the tape, Art Seeley mentions the fact that there's the bad habits or putting the bad habits for the new dancers. I think, once again, a pre-planning session with those angels is really critical to establish ahead of time what their role is as an angel. Moving along, let's let Bronc go into the tune on organized learning, okay, so we can get on with our segment and not get zeroed in on this one segment, okay?
Thank you. Under number 2 on your handout is the topic of organized learning, and I'm going to bleed a little bit into all 5 topics. First one is the art of listening, and this is a very, very difficult thing for many people because a lot of people are in a stage in their life, when they come to class, they're in a stage of their life where they are used to, and I say, quote, giving orders rather than receiving them, okay? I have a very, very large span of age in my groups. In one of my groups, they take students from 17 years and above. The other one is strictly couples and strictly couple club. So I have a very wide range of age. I have, a lot of kids that are still in school, that this is, a breeze, but a lot of people, they're not tuned into this. So you're going to have to find something that's a happy medium, for both people. One of the things that I have found has been very, very successful is that I try to avoid as much as possible making speeches to individuals. Okay? For example, a prime example would be teaching like circulates. And we want to talk to, for example, maybe have the ends circulate on parallel two-face lines, for example. Make sure that you're carrying on a conversation with the centers at the same time and keep those minds working. Centers, are you observing what's going on in the ends? Because you're going to be doing a very similar thing very quickly. And make sure that all the minds are working. And that is, one of the things for listening. Early, when I first started calling, the man who taught me to dance is here today in the hall, Bill Hay, right here in the front. And one of the things that he did in our class that I thought was fabulous and that I used in my class was when he taught wheel and deal from lines facing out. He identified the couple on the right. He said, would you raise your hand? Now the couple on the left take one step forward. All 8 minds were engaged at that point. They were listening. They were ready to respond to your command, whatever you were trying to teach them. And another thing, too, which we get into this, the idea of formation awareness. Another thing is repeating. Have them repeat things to you. For example, all 8 circulate, ends with ends and centers with centers. I think some of my groups are so sick of hearing that they repeat it in their sleep, but they don't forget it. We teach them things. We go into couples. I'll be over here. We're going to do a little thing with some 2-couple dancing here in just a moment. You go into things and say, what's your formation right now? All of a sudden, some very astute dancer right in the front yells, ocean wave. 2 seconds later, the entire floor yells, ocean wave. And I also find that very shortly after that, I put them in the same formation and say, what are you standing in? Ocean wave. And I try to work on things, make them repeating, but keeping all minds working all the time is one of the things that I think helps people with their listening. Do you all follow what I mean? If anybody wanted to comment on that same idea, do anyone have an idea that they use for their listening? No, forge ahead here. Okay. We get to the idea of teaching by definition. Ed Gilmore in the middle 50s, said, take your time. Teach these people all the very rudimentary things of every call. When people were cranking out dancers in 8 weeks, Ed Gilmore was taking 20 weeks to put them through, and he had many people that followed him. And I think that people should really take notice of that today, because we are talking about, the length of time it teaches a class, but why not be as thorough as possible on those rudimentary things, the very rudimentary things that are going to build your trades, for example, your fractions like circle left a quarter, circle left halfway, the things that are going to help them on a long-term basis understand calls. The one bad thing that can happen if we stay away from that is that your dancers become top-heavy, in that they know all the tough calls, but they have nothing underneath them to back them up. And you've got to be very, very careful of that, because it can happen, because, we think of, really neat and exciting things we can do out of Dixie style to an ocean wave or spin chain through. But if they do not know how to do hinges or trades properly, a spin chain through is a mess. So, this is my personal opinion. Again, everything up here, I'm not never telling you what to do, but these are my opinions and things that have been working for me, is that take the time with those very rudimentary things. The first 10 lessons of class are probably the most important, because that is when the people are really forming what their dancing is going to be like. And I think that the CALLERLAB idea of teaching by definition is fabulous. Don't you agree? Is there anyone that feels that the teaching by definition thing does not really work? Please speak up, or that maybe you have a problem with it, because we want to have this open between all of us. Did you guys want to come in on either way? Okay. All right, I already spoke on formation awareness. Again, that I think one of the things that helps people with formation is, just to repeat myself, is maybe when you get them in specific situations, have them call out the name of that formation. And Chuck came up with an excellent point last night about if they're aware of formations. We decided we'd have a quick 5-minute meeting that turned into about 2 hours long last night, and it was just very enlightening. I enjoyed it very, very much. And Chuck made the comment that if you can teach maybe your dancers to, if their half of their square breaks down when you're working some mirror type calling or some modular type calling, if they can look over their shoulder and maybe you can say you've got two-faced lines, maybe you can train them to get in that two-faced line and keep dancing. Another thing we find out is that I see many times that dances I call, and not only with beginners, but with club dancers and even going up into the higher levels, that people will, if their square has a problem, they'll square up and stand there. And this is I really have a problem with that, because you're wasting so much dance time. We try to convince, A, you do not have to get your corner to be square dancing. B, you do not have to dance with your partner every time to be square dancing. You can readjust when you get back home. Why not take the nearest available person of opposite sex and form a line and keep fighting? And, again, this goes back to this formation awareness thing. If you are aware, if you can make them aware of these things, make them recognize it, maybe that they'll get actually more dance time, and then maybe it can help you. Maybe the second time you go through that pattern, maybe they'll get it the second time, and they have a much greater feeling of satisfaction, say, hey, we fixed it ourselves, and here we are. We're doing good.
Bronc, just to elaborate on that thing that we talked about last night on the formation awareness, one of the concepts that many times we don't teach until maybe the plus or the advanced levels is that mirror image concept, the object of symmetry in the square. If the dancers are standing in a two-faced line formation, and you've pointed that formation out to them, and you can have them look exactly opposite to the square at their mirror image, many times when you call in circulate a center's trade, if that end is standing there looking where he's going and he sees his mirror image walking across, it gives him just a little bit of clue, and his reaction and response time can be decreased and help him in an aid. And I find that that's a terrific aid in allowing your dancers to understand that mirror image concept, that the majority of our dancing is done in a symmetrical situation. And I think that's an important concept. The other thing is formation awareness in letting your dancers identify their circles, their lines, their two-faced lines, their ocean waves, their box formations, whatever it be. Chuck, any comment on that?
No, I just concur with that. I think that it's extremely important that they understand formations, because while you're teaching, if you make them aware of a formation, and if they have problems, you can say, we were in a line of four. They know what a line of four means. They assume nothing when they come in. That's just a thing for them to be standing in until you tell them what it is. And when I say tell them, I mean not just once, but like Bronco says, you have to continue over a long process to get them to understand what what a line is, or a two-face line, or something like that.
Right. We were discussing all this last night before Bronc got up and did his Elvis Presley imitation in the lounge. So
right.
This was his warm-up prior to that time. No, the other thing we were talking about in the same sense is that we've all noticed probably in your classes that the best dancers you have are aware of not only their position but their partner's position and where everybody else is in the square, what formation they're in. The dancer that's having trouble is most of the time looking at his own feet and his own hands and maybe knows his partner. But when he's having the most trouble, he's right here. He's just looking at himself, trying to figure out where he should be. And if he looked around and had a cognizant feeling of the whole entire square, it would give him a better perspective. And I think it runs the variety from that dancer that looks at himself, to the dancer that knows his partner, to the dancer that knows the half of the square, and to the best dancer in the class that seems to have a concept of the whole square and the whole concept of his formation.
A good thing, and I just thought of this, is while you're on break period, and you're showing them formations, is a good time to point out this mirror image and relate to them, where the head of the column would be with the foot of the column on the other line, or the head of the other column on the other line, that type of thing. How they relate to that other person who's their opposite in a mirror image situation. And eventually that starts to sink in. And if they see their opposite in the position, they immediately just turn and go into the position that's available for them.
Sure. Anybody else have any comments at this point or experiences to relate? You want to come to the mic and talk?
Jerry Murray, chairman of the Rural Area Committee. I don't know if this is really on the subject. I think it is, but I'd like to get this group's opinion, and perhaps some of you, of something that has come up loud and strong to me very recently. I did some looking at the results of the legacy survey that they did, and I had a chance to analyze the comments that were written on the backside of the paper. And as an idea, perhaps we listen to the dancers a little bit more, and I learned some things. And one of them was that the dancers are crying loud and clear that they would like callers to teach ways of recovery from error in perhaps the line concept that I've been using for years, or waves or whatever. But they're saying callers teach dancers how to recover rather than to go back home and stand. Now I know there's two sides to that argument, but the dancers are saying that loud and clear, and I would like to specifically for the tape get that recorded, that we are concerned about that, and I'd like a little bit addressed to that.
Okay, Jerry, the opinion that I had stated was that I was saying that irregardless of where, what happens, if the entire square breaks down, not to pick up their partner, but to pick up any person of opposite sex and form a line at the sides position or at the heads position, whichever one that you deem. And, it's the idea of not saying that I have to dance with my partner to make it through the square. But I think that the line thing really worked. I think the line thing works out. Some years, a couple of years ago, that they were trying to get people to step into like a box 1-4 type formation, just into an 8 chain through formation. But I think that the line thing works smoother, and I think people can identify it quicker. Does anybody else have an idea they'd like to share on that?
We know enough about that procedure that perhaps they take a position or something when you can follow that could be a teaching practice.
Personally, I agree with that 100%, Jerry. I think that Jerry Murray said that what he'd like to do is find out a way to make some kind of a recommendation that CALLERLAB adopt a policy similar to that. Okay?
Just a comment. I think as CALLERLAB is through with the definitions and now proceeding into the education aspect, the caller education aspect. A lot of this could fall into either the hands of the mainstream committee or into Ernie Kinney's education committee. And although we don't necessarily have a standard policy at this time, I think as long as your class has a standard policy, I think this is one of the goals of the future is for CALLERLAB to adapt a standard policy that we can all live with, and so that dancers, if they're dancing with somebody else down the line, can also fall into the same sort of pattern. Everybody look at one another and slide in. And again, I think formation awareness is critical in here. You want to come up and talk?
Jack Weber, Victoria, BC. I don't teach dances, and I don't think any of you do. And I think possibly the moment that you let your dancers or tell them they must go back home, you are now giving them the opinion that they are dancing a dance. I tell my people they are dancing basics. They are dancing Allam on left, they are dancing swing, promenade, swing throughs, whatever, eh? So consequently, I don't encourage them to go back home because they know, or I try to get over to them, that that is what they're going to do. If I say swing through and they if I say swing through and they louse up, then they know they don't have to go back home, because the next thing that's coming is going to be the next basic that they have to do. And I think perhaps if you encourage the thought that it is a basic, a series of basics that we're dancing, that you may not run into this problem of everybody having to go back home and wait for what's happening. Thanks.
Good, I think that says it. Yeah, very good. Okay, Bronc, you want to go on to timing?
Okay. I think I'll go to this mic because I want to get to the record. When I first start the class, oh, by the way, just to backtrack just slightly, Jerry, I think that really something should be. Would that be to the styling committee? Is that who would that be more in education? Okay, because I really think that this. I hear this comment from a lot of other callers, and especially and a lot of dancers too feel like they say that we have no guidelines on this. There's nothing written on paper. We should have something written on paper. Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about is timing. Okay, we are presented with lists when we come to CALLERLAB called timing the basic program and timing the mainstream program. I think that these things stick for beginners class. Maybe not the first time that you show something, you give them a little extra time. We all know that when we do singing calls for the beginners class, we should give them things that they can't miss, and maybe the first few lessons, but we should build up, because what's going to happen is what I call the sledgehammer effect. The first time they go to someone else and you've cut the timing way back, that you're giving them, 20 beats to do a right and a left through or whatever, and this guy comes up in there and he just calls standard timing right to him. It's the sledgehammer effect. Bam! And they're very disappointed. They're not only disappointed in themselves, they're disappointed in you. This guy's not teaching me how to dance properly. So we should, start this early in class. But I think it goes back further than that. The first night of class, how many of you here, I just want to ask, how many of you march your people the first night of class in time to the music? Okay, that's quite a number. I want to show you something that I do with a record on a hi-hat label. That's not a plug. And also there's one on K-Locks very similar to this. This record's called Hot Breaks. And I start off every class session for about the first 4 or 5 weeks with this record. That's a hi-hat. But now listen to that. You can't really miss. And you tell them you face down the side of the hall. And they say, we're going to take one step for every beat. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Head up. Shoulders back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's put your weight on the balls of your feet and shuffle. Small steps. Make it nice. And you can see the floor smooth out. And they've got the idea already. And you can start adjusting your timing to that. They're dancing with the music. So many times that we have to be very careful as callers that we are teaching people to dance, not to do movements. We want people to dance. Heads up, shoulders back. What looks better than that on a dance floor? Isn't that beautiful to see it? When you're standing there calling and the floor, the heads are all level. Doesn't that look fantastic? And the first night of class, of course, you've got your joggers, leapers, and skippers. You know, you've got the guy that there's these, and then everybody wants to skip. And, you know, usually that problem takes care of itself if they're skipping. Because by the second tip, you can see their tongues are about down to here, you know. But anyway, but it's really important that we learn with the music and take the time to show people the proper way to walk, the proper way to stay with the music. Does anyone care to comment further on that? Okay. Now, another thing that we find out that too, some of us who are hired to do classes rather than run for ourselves, we are placed under time restrictions. Okay. We know this is, whether this is a problem or whether it isn't, I think that for what I'm going on here, that's rather immaterial. But I think that that little thing like that, and perhaps maybe starting with that same kind of just that beat every time. Kalox has a record, Ping Pong Hoedown is another one. That's all it is. Bump, 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 bump. Just a good solid beat. There's a lot of square dance records with that. But you want to make sure that they can put the foot down every time with the beat, you know. It's fine that, I know a lot of you probably use some bossa novas for, they have that bossa nova pattern, drum beats. They're really neat to use for the first few weeks. We discussed this last night. But for the first time, we want them something that they can really go to, you know. Or, you know, these first singing calls, Just Because, Shindig in the Barn, you know, really those kind of things really, really go. Another thing that we found, to get away from that just a little bit, the last subject we had on here was time savers. And I start all of my classes in a large circle, from night one till the last night. The only time that they don't start in the circle is at their graduation from the basic program and their graduation from the mainstream program. Those are carried on by regular dance. I do the first two tips starting from a big circle, which you can work all your calls that work out of a circle, Alaman left, all your arm turns, box the nat, do-sa-do, right and left grand. This also teaches people at right and left grand that you're going to meet the fifth person and take them, not your partner, and take them and promenade. Okay? Anyway, but then what we do is we get in a situation, we have them promenade, and then I have them stop. And I'll ask a guy in the front, sir, will you wheel around and face the couple behind you? And then all the alternate groups wheel around. So we've got little two-couple setups all around the hall. Okay? Basically what this does, while the heads are walking through a movement, what are the sides doing? Nothing. Everybody gets to do those calls that can be worked in two couples at the same time. And it's a super time saver. I have found it. I've used it. And also it does one other thing. It separates husband from wife if you are doing couples. And there's two problems with that, which is hanging on to one another's shirt tails. I can't dance unless I'm with my wife. I can't dance unless I'm with my husband. Plus it eliminates one other thing, kicking one another's in the shins, fighting. And I bet you that you'll find... Okay, you got a few honest ones. Okay, anyway, but it's the truth. But what I'd like to do now is I'd just like to take a very, very short time, and I'd like to get two couples up here and just show you some of the, a couple of the things that we can do with the two-couple dancing to help with your teaching, okay? You're a beginner. Can I ask you to... Okay. Would we like to go that far?
No, I might just point out that some of these things that Bronc is talking about are what, once again, what has worked for him. You may not agree that, you know, starting out in a circle is most advantageous for you, but once again, these are things that have worked out. And if you have comments regarding that, feel free to come on up and step up and talk.
Okay. Right. This is Don and Lexi Benson from Central California, Bob and Ann Pointer from Illinois. And I'm going to show you just a few of the things. Here we have some first nighters, okay? And I have already in a circle taught them how to do a courtesy turn, okay? By having the girls just step in front of your partner, guys courtesy turn them to face back in. Suppose we want to teach them a lady's chain from this position. Don't you think that we're going to save a lot of time by doing it from this little two-couple setup than we would watching the sides do it and watching the heads do it? Okay? For example, now, from here, from the two ladies' chain, okay? I'm going to ask the ladies, since they know how to do it, we're going to ask them to star across to the guy across from them. The gentlemen are going to step back on their right foot and extend their left hand forward. So let's have the girls star across, and with your right hand, place your left hand in the other guy's hand and courtesy turn them to face the couple across from you. Boom, and you save a lot of time. Here's another thing. When we got them in the big circle,
we can pass through, we can move on to the next couple. So if you have two weak couples together, you can move them on, and they can work with the next couple and maybe get it a little better. Okay? We're going to dance just a little bit. I don't know what kind of shape my voice is in this morning. Let's see. See, this record's got a lot of work. Go forward, come back. Do a right on left, do and turn the girl. Star through, veer to the left. What's your formation? Girls trade. Bend the line, star through. Touch. What's your formation? Ladies trade. Swing through. That's a trade by the right and a trade by the left. Boys run around this girl, bend the line. Then a right on left, do. Two ladies chain. Roll away. Go forward, come back. Box the mat. Right on left through, the other way back. Square through 4 hands. Do a U-turn, straight back. Square through 3 hands. What happened here? Right? Do a U-turn back. Star through. You're home. Okay? And that's just a little bit of stuff right there that you can work with two couple dancing. Of the 68, yes, Dick. Yeah, isn't that great? Right. Okay. Dick said that if they were brand new beginners, they were the sharpest beginners he's ever seen. Yes. No, it's just we're just walking through something very quickly and not. No, I did not tell them to put their hand back here. No, I said extend your left hand and put it in the guy's left hand like this, and he will courtesy turn you. I had explained earlier that I had already taught them a courtesy turn from a big circle by having the lady step forward in front of the gentleman. Okay, right. I am glad you said that because that has been dropped. Thank you. Yes. What? Oh. Okay, we'll save that one. Lexi's comment was the main reason that they put their hand behind their back is so the fellas don't go any further. Oh, there you go. Right. No, explains itself then. Alrighty. But anyway, again, thank you guys very much. But I would like to solicit your comments now on the idea of using this method. Are there any of you who just use squares or do not use the two couple that feel that there are more advantages to that? Would you please come forward and do so now? All right. I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bronc, I think Good, let's give Bronc a hand. I think the only comment that I might have here is I don't necessarily agree with the circle concept for a long period of time in the class. I don't see anything wrong with having the heads do a movement in the initial teach and the sides watch, especially when you cue the sides to say, now I want you to pay attention, sides, and you have set up a demonstration situation from the start by having the heads do the movement, the sides watch. The next time you teach a movement, let's work the sides and have the head watch. The demonstration technique, not only during the teach, when you have your sets formed, but even before you begin the session, while the people have broken from the previous tip, they're out getting a drink of water or something, or they've just come back in, you can pick up a couple of couples and right in the front walk them through a quick swing through or something and say, now we're going to teach you a little bit of something and we'd like to have you look at it first. That demonstration technique, I think, is really crucial and important in class. It's a terrific time saver.
I just want to ask one more question. How many of you here ever bring up angels to demonstrate something for your class? Quite a few of you. Okay, I think that's a good idea too. I think that really works good. I do it very rarely, but generally when they're really having a hard time with something, I'll say, I'm going to show you these people that know how to do this con. I want you to watch the mechanics of what are going on, and it is a real helper. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Go ahead.
Another time I think is a good if you get two beginners, if it's a simple call, and let them be the demonstrating couple and give them directions, and the others see that, hey, they can do it, and I think they get a little bit just as much out of that sometimes too.
Jim, you want to come forward to the microphone? Okay. For
For you guys that have the big classes where you can do the circle like you're talking about, the circle thing is great. The classes we have are in a rural area, and I could no more get those number of people in a circle than fly. So I use the contra lines instead. Do the same type of things with contra lines, and I can do that with 6 couples. I can't make a circle, double circle with 6 couples. That also allows me then to later on begin using contras, and by the 6th night, my beginners are halfway accomplished contra dancers, and they have succeeded in something, and it's a lot of fun for them to be able to do the contras. It also adds a lot of variety.
Very good. I think Mike's going to address that in his presentation now.
Right. Good point. We'll move on to, we've gone through organized learning, and now we want to step on to variety for a well-rounded dance education. First of all, just backtracking a bit with what we're talking about in these demonstrations, I think, and going back to what Chuck said, I think all of us can use the between-tip time for a short mention on philosophy or history, and have handout material available for our class people. Make it a total education. Make it a total perspective on philosophy and history of the activity. It's even feasible to introduce rounds and contras, clogging, other aspects of the activity that we may not ourselves be proficient in, but have other people come in and help us out in that way. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. First of all, going on with the history, once again, I think history is important in the activity because it gives that dancer the idea that this is just not the lone club in the whole world, that there are other places that this dancer can go and dance, and that the American square dance is important in American history. It's unique. Give them the present news that it's up before Congress, and this whole situation with your congressman to be the national American folk dance. Give them the feeling like there's more to the activity. Mention that, did you know that the American square dance movement has a Rose Parade float? That there's a lot more involved in this activity as far as benefit dances, and in other words, give them the whole picture. And I think that helps them to realize that there's more than just their little club and where they're at when they go on vacation to Timbuktu, North Carolina, that they can find a dance there and dance and provide them with the handbooks that are available, the contact points if they're going to travel, and tell them on their next vacation if they want to go vacation and bring a batch of square dance clothes or just maybe one set, that they can dance there too. It's a fun place to meet people and a nice social outlet. Once again, we were talking about the place for the history handout, so I won't repeat that. Another source of that, of some perspective on the activity, is a CALLERLAB handout that just went a couple of years ago called the Modern Square Dance Image. Has a little bit on all the aspects of square dancing. It's out of print. Is that right? No, I'll be darned. Some of us were lucky enough to get one of those things. That might be interesting. That's an interesting comment that modern square dance image is out of print. I still think that there are other avenues, such as the national magazines and caller associations. And these are interesting avenues to explore in your association. I think one of the... Go ahead, another comment? Would you like to come up and talk a little bit? State your name.
Thank you. Vic Graves from Kamloops, BC. There's just one thing that I was thinking about here, that we probably run into a lot of situations where in the teaching and the developing of dancers and then trying to encourage new dancers and leading them to believe that square dancing is international, that there is a float in the Rose Bowl parade and that sort of thing. But there's another thing that we have to counteract there, in the smaller areas particularly, and that's the fact that square dancing doesn't bring in a lot of money. We can't normally rent hotel ballrooms. We generally end up dancing in little community halls, schoolrooms if we can get them for $10 a night, $15 a night. And there's an area in there that I think that we should address ourselves to in trying to get over to the people that square dancing is not hick anymore. I mean, we hold our conventions in the MGM in Reno. This is the first time I've been here, incidentally. It's a tremendous place. The Vancouver Ball, for instance, in the Hotel Vancouver, just a great affair. But we still have that square dancing is hick back there somewhere, and we can't seem to get away from it. I'm wondering if we can somehow get through to dancers, particularly people that we're trying to interest in becoming part of our square dance beginners classes, that we may have to start out in the community hall. We may have to start up in the $10 schoolroom, but it surely doesn't have to stay there.
Right, very good, Vic. I think that's giving the whole perspective on the activity. It's still a grassroots activity. It still begins in the schools. It still begins with that beginner class, whether it be 1 or 2 squares or whether it be 30 squares. There's still a whole idea of perspective. I think one of the most important things that we're entering into, and it just does my heart a lot of good to see CALLERLAB finally get over this big hump of definitions and to get into this area of caller education where we can all kind of treat this whole area of teaching as if we were in fact teachers and develop our own libraries and develop our own feeling of the way somebody else does something and feeling that there's always something we can learn. Although we might have a system that tends to work for us, there may be something that somebody's doing down the way or somebody's doing across the country that helps us. And I think that we have to be open-minded about it, and we have to be real true leaders. One of the things that came out in the Sets in Order magazine just this month was a thing that Les Gocher talked about, and I had to take a peek at this because it had something to do with the qualities and how the dancers visualize us as teachers. First of all, they visualize us as an authority figure. And in essence, being a leader, we almost have to be somewhat of a minister, somewhat of a legal advisor, somewhat of a guidance counselor, all rolled up into one. We have to have a positive attitude. Les also goes on to talk about we have to think more in terms as leaders as what is productive or what is counterproductive. Bronc made a statement earlier about zeroing in on Joe Smith down here. He circulated the wrong time twice, and you say, Joe, you've been going the wrong way for the last 5 minutes. Now turn around, and when you zero in or focus on something, that's something that's definitely counterproductive, and it'll also enter in somewhere else in shortly here. That it's one of the things that can cause a dancer embarrassment and change a lot of his motivation for learning to square dance when he's singled out like that. So unbiased, proper leadership. We're all in a position where we can tremendously influence our dancers. I've had letters personally in the mail about such and such a caller in my local area that's down talking CALLERLAB or down talking this caller or that caller. That kind of negative comment to our dancers is picked up, and it's thought of as being gospel by our dancers. So we're in a tremendous position to influence people and should give them both sides of the story. Give them both sides of the activity or the many sides of the activity. And I think as leaders that makes a whole lot of difference. Accentuating the positive, trying to present all the sides of the story, and being a promoter and an ambassador of goodwill. If you have a problem in your class, it's not something that you have to bring up with, say, a couple or 2 couples, that you have to zero in and involve the whole class. It's something that you can take to the side and talk to people. If Bill James has a problem, he hits the bottle a little bit before he talks, take Bill out and talk to him a little bit. Or you might enter into your indoctrination handbook and say, a good point in that indoctrination handbook is you had a rough day, you go home, and so talk to it in general terms. In other words, address the problems, but be an ambassador and at the same time accentuate the positive. The other thing is etiquette and manners. I think all of this goes into what Chuck talked about with presenting that, styling points during teaching a figure, or when you're involved in between tips, mentioning points of etiquette and styling, walking out of squares, dancing with everybody in the hall, not just the square that you danced in. Many of us use the computer system in the class to mix up our dancers. Many of, like Bronc, will start out the system with the circle and get the dancers interchanging that way, keeping this activity social. And you're really in a position where you don't have to say, well, listen, guys, we want to mix up, but you can strategically make all this occur without there being a conscious effort on the part of the dancers. The other thing that I wanted to mention about is the presentation of rounds, quadrilles, contras, mixers, and cloggings in your class. Now, all of us are not proficient in all these areas of square dancing, and I don't think that we all have to teach a round in our square dance or a class, or go through a clogging session, or teach contra, or even feel that we have to. But I feel that somewhere in the class that mention should be made. In several ways, this can be done. To at least expose the dancers to this aspect of the activity and give them the perspective like, geez, there's an awful lot you can get involved in, and you could square dance and round dance and clog and contra 5 or 6 nights a week. Take your time. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of friends to be had. Enjoy what you're learning now, and when you feel like you want to get into another phase, great. One thing that works out real nice is if you have a round dance cure that's close by, and on your night of class, you can talk them into coming over and teaching a mixer or a type of a round. you might be able to stir a little bit of interest. So you have taken an outsider coming in to do something like this. Another technique, if you want to show around or show clogging, is to give a demonstration yourself or have somebody else come in and demonstrate. Say you've got a class full of angels, and you and your wife might want to get up and do a round dance and say, this is what we do in between the tips. And tell them that there's a round chosen every month. In other words, expose them to this. Not that you have to teach them all this. We're all limited with a certain amount of time. But the presentation of this is really critical to give them that whole perspective. Also, another thing that I like to do is to put on an old record or an old dance. The way we used to dance, say, this is where we used to dance in 1959. You know, if you got a hands on a 78 or something, this is the kind of music. This is where our music has been. This is where it's going to. This is how thick these records used to be. And we used to have to carry around this case and give them a little perspective. Teach them a historical dance. I think those kind of things gives the dancers perspective. Where we've been, where we're going. A lot of those dancers will say, gee, my kids are learning that dance in school right now. You mean the schools are 20 years behind the times in our particular area? Well, sure, they may be. But it gives those dancers a perspective of where the activity is. Anybody have any comments on maybe something that's worked for them in presenting anything to their classes like that? Anything? John, did you have something to add? Subliminal advertising? You mean with this exposure? Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It really is. It's maybe subliminal promotion. Yeah, exactly. John Fogg made that comment that we're promoting or advertising in all those aspects, and the same with the float. John? Yeah, you want to come up and talk? Great. And Jim, if you want to? Super. Just for the tape, Jim Blackwell mentions a movie available from the Jim. By the Lloyd Shaw Foundation, and if you have the availability or the area to present something like that, that's super. That's just a bigger expanse you're adding to your dancers' education. John?
Mike, thank you. Bronc. I'd like to say a word on the square dance float. This is the 8th year it's going on. I did not give my name. John Fogg, Pasadena, California. I would like to say that last Tuesday, Charlie, Frank, my treasurer, and myself, we went into the attorney's office. We signed the papers for the 501c3 educational tax deductible, which will be about 30 or 60 days before we get back to the IRS. And then it'll be written off. And one sad thing, my co-chairman, Charles Nadeo, his wife passed away Saturday morning at Magic Mountain. But is there any quick questions you'd like to ask about the float? It is subliminal advertising. You can ask anyone, did they learn or did they see the float? Is that how you got in? No one. But it's down in their memory. I think that's good.
Right. Well, anybody knows the Nadeos and can send a card along or their sympathy. Yeah. I think that would be terrific. Okay, any other comments regarding that? The only other thing that I would like to discuss as far as the variety is to go on and talk just a short time about plateaus of learning. There's an excellent article that I happen to follow on Gloria Rios Roth wrote for American Square Dance Sets Noter Society. She wrote about the plateaus of learning, and it's a terrific article that at least somewhere in your background it's kind of nice to put. So when you're teaching your class, you kind of have an idea of what motivates these people to learn, how they're able to absorb, and maybe allows you to standardize your teaching technique so that your dancers can predict that and know that if they've walked through it the first night and they've learned it, that, gee, we'll get a chance to walk through it the second night that figure is presented, so that they know kind of what's coming ahead and they follow into that pattern. Basically, she talked about the learning process, and I'll go through this quickly about the dancer being the readiness of that dancer, the motivation of that dancer to learn, the organization presented by the teacher, so that it's organized to the point where that student can absorb and have some type of a structure that helps them retain the knowledge that they learn, and also the transfer training process that goes from you, the teacher, to the students. And I think the one part that I wanted to mention, as far as readiness of the dancer to learn, a lot of that's beyond your control. Many of the men are dragged into class, and so they're about as ready as nothing to get in there and learn. Although a lot of this can be created when you get them dancing, and their motivation for their basic social needs, and we're talking just basic social needs here. Of the motivations, there's the physical needs for food and clothing and shelter, and then there's the social needs, which are the need for recognition, that need for security, not zeroing in on Joe Smith down here when he's circulating the wrong way. They want to be part of the group. They don't want to be made insecure and made to look foolish and zeroed out. So you're taking one of those, or decreasing his motivation to learn when you take away that security. They need to be able to respond, to hoop and a holler, to meet each other. They need to have that new experience of the learning and learning with new people. That having fun is a motivation in itself. And if you have people who are motivated, you're going to have people that not only learn, but they like what they're learning and they like the activity. Organization, I think, what we're trying to say here is that learning proceeds more rapidly when it's presented in an organized fashion, and that's basically it in essence. Bronc, did you have something to add to that? No? Okay. The transfer training is basically the ability of the dancer to execute that movement. When you know that movement has been transferred, that training has been transferred, is when that dancer has the ability to dance that movement and execute it at some other later time from a various formation. But he knows the basic principles of that movement, and it takes a dancer to be aware of his before and after facing direction, be aware of the square dance formations and others involved in the square, and it also, a dancer needs to know his positioning in relation to others in the square. You also notice that many of the experienced dancers are able to draw a blank for a minute and then they see a hole and they jump in and fill it, and that kind of a feeling for the experienced dancer is something that takes a while to learn. But you know the transfer training has taken place when that dancer has the ability to do that. You might start out, basically we've got movements that Gloria goes on to say that are simple to learn and they're tough to learn. If a person can relate to a movement from another life experience, circle left, circle right, forward and back, something that's self-explanatory, we don't have to drill that movement in. But if it's a tougher movement that involves additional terminology like recycle, spin chain through, something like this, we need to go into a more involved process. And she suggests a process such as this. The first night, you might talk a movement through. You might demonstrate it first before beginning to teach it. You might first talk it a little bit. You might walk it. And you might go ahead and dance it. The whole basic concept of teaching, the tell, the show, the do. Do it for the heads, do it for the sides. Or as in Bronc's case, do it for everybody. Have everybody working at one time, and if it appears, like Bronc says, that you got a couple weak people together, pass through, move on to the next, and get them working with somebody new. A fresh outlook, a fresh look at that figure, and I think it's an excellent technique. The other thing is that you've got them dancing that first night, you've got them dancing that basic. If you can include it in the singing call, and this may take a little bit of homework, when you walk into that class and you know you're going to teach a movement, make sure you have a singing call figure for that movement. It doesn't have to be the odd position that you have taught that night, but have something to fall back in the singing call so these people can include that basic in there. Although if in that same time another judgment feature is that if they're bombarded with this movement, such as spin chain through, for instance, you might want to back off and lay off that movement and just simply work it a little bit that first night. Come back on it the second night and talk it again and walk it again. If they know, for instance, as I've said before, that you're going to walk that movement the second night, then they're going to say, well, we learned it pretty good. We're a little bit fuzzy on it, but he's going to walk it again. Let's be ready for it. They're tuned into it, and that tuning or that dancer being able to ready to listen is once again part of Bronc's comments about the art of listening. You've got that dancer's attention, and they're ready. They can plan this ahead of time. The third night, you might want to give the dancers a warning, square them up, or put them in circles and say, we're going to dance this such and such a movement that we've been dancing for the last couple weeks. And then go right ahead and make a simple explanation, or go right ahead and get them right into it, depending upon the difficulty of the movement. The fourth night, use the basic outright, or use the movement outright with only a partial cue. And the fifth night, the fifth week or so, they should be into that movement and going. And that kind of organized approach helps the dancer to know ahead of time what he's getting into, and at the same time, he'll be able to predict the organization in your technique. Naturally, encourage those dancers to stay in class and to not miss, but provide something, and then in case your dancers do miss, provide something before class or the first tip in class. Provide something for those dancers to be able to pick up where they've left off. Another thing, or the last thing that Gloria mentioned in her article that I liked, was the 5 category of basics. As most of you know, there's circle maneuvers, there's 2-couple maneuvers, there's line maneuvers, There's 4 couple maneuvers and there's 2 people maneuvers. And when we're getting into the depths of class, when you're trying to teach more than 1 or 2 of these basics in the various categories, you run into a confusion factor, and which again enters into a frustration area, and I think that can be a real problem. So that's another thing to be cognizant of. Learning by repetition and teaching and reteaching, I think, are important factors. Bronc, did you want to comment on about frustration levels or self-evaluation? Anybody have any other comments about what we've gone through, the learning process or the plateaus of learning? Comments about anything else? Gloria Rios Roth. She was just in here, the gal in the back with in the blue that had made the comment coming in and out. There are other articles. Jack Murtha, I think, has an article on the same subject. That article appeared in Sets in Order, American Square Dance. The actual year and date I'm not really certain of. I wish I could give that to you. Yeah, Phil?
Phil Farmer from Anaheim, California. Another thing, especially when you're working with the newer people and if they're having a lot of trouble with a move, when they finally get the move down, recognize it. Maybe not just that one person, but recognize the whole floor of the fact that people are having trouble with a move, and let them know that, hey, they've got it, they've done a good job with it, and make them feel really recognized into the fact that they're doing a good job. Make them feel that what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing. And I'm a supervisor on my regular job, and that was one of the things they stressed in the course they sent us through, is when people do a good job, let them know that they're doing a good job.
Excellent. That was one of the things along the same lines.
One of the subjects that we came up discussing last night was self-evaluation, and I think really this is the bottom line, okay? And just very quickly, I'll tell you the best way to do it. Maybe once a month, hook up a tape recorder and look at yourself honestly. Who did I jump on in class? Did you point at some guy or some lady, call the color of their clothes or their name, and verbally abuse them? Did you do that? By the same token, were you so gushy it was sickening, if you know what I mean? Phil is absolutely correct. The reward is there. If they do good, tell them so. But if they're having trouble, and maybe that they're, pushing and shoving in their frustration level, don't pick on individuals. Make the comment to the entire group. We have a problem retaining dancers, keeping dancers through class. Don't add to that problem by picking on them. But again, listen to that tape. Listen, are your commands concise? Was your choice of music good? Could I, if I didn't know anything about square dancing, could I understand the definition that I just gave to these people, or the way that I taught that call? And finally, when I came with that tape, would I honestly feel that that man standing or that lady standing behind the microphone is he or she the floor's friend?
And going along with Bronco said about your class and criticizing them in a certain way, if you can do it with humor, is the best way. And it's relating to the whole class and not to one individual, which is very embarrassing. And it's a good way to chase people from your activity. So,
anybody else have a comment? The last thing that we'd like to talk about is simply providing additional dancing experiences for your dancers. In other words, at the halfway level. And this may take some organization amongst the other callers or the clubs in your area, but being able to clue your dancers into other halfway dances that they can go to, or other three-quarter dances, or a Christmas dance. Vary their experiences with having a club come in and have a potluck night. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing that, but making these dancers aware that there are other dances they can go to, other people they can dance to, other areas that will enhance their learning experience. And I think it gives the dancer a better chance in their learning than we can possibly give them just in one session alone. Right, Mickey Blanc made a comment of having some place to meet afterwards with dancers. Adding the social aspect to the goes along with having a potluck dinner maybe before class or some of those type of things that can add the social aspect to the activity, because I think we really have to stress once again, in addition to learning, that this is a social activity. This is a place to make friends, and the bottom line is keeping it fun.
I'm Dan McCornack from Eugene, Oregon. We have about 17 or 18 clubs in our area, and we have our new dancers alternately go to all of the clubs throughout the area starting in January, and it has been an excellent way of exposing our new dancers to this thing.
One thing we do in the Washington area, and it has been met with some success, is that starting in about October, we have Friday or Saturday night dances for class level people, and they are governed to be about 4 weeks behind what we would consider their average dance ability of beginners, and they run from about October through about end of April or May, and it gives the dancers a chance to go out and dance if the callers promote it for them, and it's a nice activity for them because they get to meet and talk to and dance to many different callers.
Another thing that I do is when I'm teaching a class, there's about 3 times during the class that I will either intentionally book something so that I'm busy on a night and have to get another guy to come in, or I've even stayed home and had another guy come in and teach the class to give the dancers a new experience with a different caller, with a different voice. And in the Bakersfield area in California, there was 1 or 2 clubs down in that area. Before you can graduate from a beginner's class, you have to go out and get a certain amount of caller signatures before they will even graduate you from your class. I called a halfway dance a big party on day after New Year's up there this year, and I never signed so many little pieces of paper and books in my entire life. And I thought the Century Club was bad, but these beginners just flooded the place. Before we can graduate, we got to get your signature. That's something else you want to try is make the people go out and dance to other callers for the different experiences and the different teaching techniques that these guys use, because we're all different. We all teach different.
Right. We as teachers, how many of you do that? Switch with other callers or have? That's super. It gives the opportunity for those dancers to come in and dance to somebody different, and switch classes for 1 week or something, and be able to get it